I'm here with Jake West, writer, director, producer, and editor of the vampire feature film Razorblade Smile, which hit movie theaters around the same time Buffy began slaying on TV. Now it's been remastered to ultra-high def along with 9 hours of bonus extras. Jake is a fascinating creator, and I think you'll find our chat really entertaining. Breaking news. Since Jake and I spoke, a movie he's directing called White with Kate Beckinsale has been greenlit. He starts helming that soon. And now, here's our chat. I am so excited to hang out with you, to get to chat today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, Juliet. It's an absolute honor to be talking to you and one of my favorite characters from Buffy, Drusilla herself. That's amazing. So thank you so much for having me on and talking about my little vampire film.
Oh my gosh. So should we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump right in. Let's get in there and rock and roll.
Get in there. Okay. So what is it that got you into vampires to start with?
Well, basically, when I was very young, probably about 7 or 8, they used to show the Universal films on BBC Two in the UK, and they used to be on kind of late night. And as I was getting older, I used to also sort of sneak in and try and watch them. And it's funny because at the time, my mum was quite scared of vampire films, so that made me sort of even more excited because she would be sort of nervous by them. And this is like Bela Lugosi sort of level of vampires. And to me, it was just fascinating, this idea of these people that could live forever in terms of the immortality of it. So every Halloween, I used to dress up as a vampire from about the age 7 onwards. And I've got some great little photos of me back in the day. So I always loved vampires. And as I got older, we used to have more and more double bills on the BBC. And they used to have a double bill of a Universal film and then a Hammer movie. So I got to see all of the next generation of what was going on. And I was born in 1969. So Hammer was still making some films at that point. They were coming towards the end of the cycle. But I got to see Christopher Lee as Dracula, Peter Cushing, all these wonderful actors. And all of a sudden, I was going into my teenage years and it started obviously feeling more erotic and more in colour. And the Hammer stuff was so much more vibrant and in your face. So from that onwards, all of a sudden, we had a golden run of vampire movies in the 80s, from Fright Night and Lost Boys and Near Dark, and then carrying on to the 90s with Interview with the Vampire and all this stuff. So I felt very blessed to be at a time when all of this vampire stuff was around, and I was just in love with it all my life, really.
I remember that because I spent my formative years growing up in London, and I remember all of that being on the telly, and it was amazing.
It felt sort of forbidden as well, especially when you're younger, before you're old enough to watch it. So that excitement was also something I think that drew me to it.
So when did you start making movies? How did you make that happen?
Okay, well, I was a teenager in the 1980s, and this was the first time we saw home video cameras coming in, camcorders, things like that. Previously to that, you had to film on Super 8, and Super 8 was very expensive because you had to buy film and then send it away and get it processed. So it's very hard to shoot much on Super 8, and then it was very difficult to edit it because you needed an editing machine, and it was very fiddly. So I experimented with Super 8, but it was really too expensive for me. But as video cameras were coming out, I was so determined to get one that I took a part-time job. I was at college at the time doing A-levels, and I took a part-time job at the local Kentucky Fried Chicken, which at the time paid really, really well. It was £5 an hour back in like 1986, which was a lot of money back then. So I worked there for over a year and a half to save up enough money to buy a video camera, which was a JVC GRS 707 SVHS camera, which I still got it, and it's featured in some of the extras on the documentary. And that's what I shot all of my early stuff on. So I got a chance to be able to go out and shoot loads of stuff with my friends. But at that point, there was no proper editing stuff. So it was kind of hard to edit. So I tried to film stuff in sequence, which was quite good from learning how to make a film. Because you would shoot a close-up and a wide shot, and you actually were trying to do it in camera. It wasn't always that successful, but it made you think about editing. Then the college I was at, West Kent College, they started a media arts BTEC course, and they purchased some editing equipment, which at the time was very basic editing equipment, but they had this editing machine. So I used to beg to stay in college. So I used to be there until they shut the college. Every night I would go into the edit suite, they would let me in. And every night around sort of 8:30, when the cleaner and everyone had finished up, they would be like, "You got to go now." So I really learned how to edit when I was about 17, 18 at this point. And that's really how I started to form the missing component. You can shoot, but you need to edit. As Alfred Hitchcock said, editing is the language of film. And if you can't edit, you don't speak the language.
First of all, my husband Dev is from Kent as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Whereabouts?
Sidcup.
Oh, Sidcup. Yeah. Well, that's kind of close to where I am now. I'm in Bromley right now.
Oh, yes.
So Sig Cup is actually fairly close. I go past it quite a lot.
You mentioned your parents. Were they immediately supportive? Are they creative people as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky that my parents were massive film fans because my dad always wanted to show me cinema. If he liked something, he'd always go, "Oh, you've got to watch this." And particularly like the spaghetti westerns, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars. So every time something interesting was on, he would say, "You should watch this." And I used to get taken to the cinema all the time as well. So I was one of that generation that saw Stars at the cinema when I was 7 or 8 years old. I think it opened in the UK a little bit later in the States. It might have been just after Christmas or at the beginning of 78, but that's when I saw it. And then I got to see stuff like Close Encounters and all the Raiders films and Ghostbusters and Poltergeist and all this stuff was at the local cinema. So yeah, I would go all the time. And obviously then the vampire films came and I was 17 years old when I saw Lost Boys and that absolutely blew my mind. At the same token, we also had video VHS in our homes for the first time. And that means we could see kind of classic stuff. So I got to see stuff like Nosferatu and Vampire and catching up with stuff that I was too young to see at the cinema, like The Hunger, which is one of my favourite vampire films, with the beautiful Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie as vampires with Bauhaus. I mean, you can't really get more perfect than that for a vampire movie. So that made a big mark on me as well. So yeah, everything was just sort of combining. Sorry, to answer your question, absolutely, my parents were really supportive and because they were film lovers and they were really interested because not many people made films at that point. I don't think that they thought I could necessarily have a career in it, but they could see how interested I was. At the college I was at doing this BTEC course, the tutor said that I was by far the best person doing it and recommended me for film school. And then I went on to film school and did a degree. So yeah, I was lucky that my parents loved movies and I also used to shoot everything at their house. We had this quarter of a mansion house. So that was my film studio. In fact, that's where quite a lot of Razorblade Smile is shot as well, in there and all the surrounding areas in Tunbridge Wells. So everything kind of combined to draw in all of that stuff when I was younger.
You talked about editing being such a large piece, and I feel like it was for me as well. Before even being a director, as an actress, I had a director that I worked with on my second or third film, and he brought me into the edit bay and allowed me to sit and watch the edit process and even asked for input, which is very rare.
Wow.
And I learned so much about storytelling from a film standpoint, and it informed as an actress knowing, oh, they're going to be at the close-up for this. 99% they will be, it depends. And just understanding those mechanics informed so much of the technical aspect of being an actor. It really opened my eyes.
No, definitely. And I think that an actor can learn a lot through editing and certainly understanding the size of the performance they need to give, depending on where the camera is and what it's like when the camera's close to you. You really don't need to over-project and overdo it. It's not theatre. In the UK, we have a much bigger tradition of theatre actors. And when I was making all my early films, I didn't really know any actors. So the people I did use were basically just my mates. They were just like goth kids and punks. So I've got like a funny array. So even I learned the rhythm of editing and I was always thinking, God, it'd be nice if I could work with some actors who could act more. All my early films are great because they kind of encapsulate that my teenage years and all of my friends I was hanging out with. But yeah, editing is such a powerful thing. And it is the thing that is kind of unique about film as a medium because you're working in time and space. It's not just a frozen image and it's not just sound. It's the meshing of those two and the fact that a shot size changes the rhythm of an edit. And if you have an editor who maybe doesn't have good taste, or if the editor or the director is making the wrong choices and you know you've given a better performance, you don't see it in the edit, that can change your performance massively as well. So it's a very powerful tool. I know actors are often very, very wary on set because they always want to make friends with the director of photography because they know that they're shooting them, so they want to get on their good side, so they're nicely lit. But what they should also do is go and say hello to the editor. But this is some guy who works on the film longer than anybody else who's involved in the film, but normally the one person that nobody ever meets on a set.
Well, don't they say there's 3 movies, the movie that is written, the script, the movie that is shot, and then the movie that comes out from the edit?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah. I mean, I always say that the last draft of the script is the edit. You could be rewriting lines, doing ADR, you can change things. And so it's almost like going back to the script in a way. If you produce a script of the actual film, you're changing stuff that was on the original script. So yeah, it's definitely a fascinating process. And you're always learning, however old you are, you're always trying to refine your editing skills or the performances when you're working with people. So I think that's why film is so fascinating to people who get seduced by it. because it's so, there's so many different processes, and it's such a journey that you go when you're doing a movie. So yeah, I mean, I love it.
What was film school like for you?
Well, for me, there were very, very few film schools in the UK this is like 1990 when I went. So it was still, there was like the National Film and Television School, but that was more for people who were doing a master's, and I was doing a BA. There was like Ravensbourne, and Bournemouth, and they were more technical colleges. And there was a few art colleges that did them. And because I came more from that kind of art, I was always into drawing and kind of art and photography and all these things. So I thought the art college route would do me better. So I went to a place called West Surrey College of Art and Design, which is in Farnham in Surrey. And there I got to learn how to use 16mm equipment. So I was already confident with being able to make stuff. It was more, I wanted to learn how to use film, because if you wanted to shoot video cameras at that point, the quality was pretty bad. I mean, if you look at stuff shot on VHS or SVHS or any of those video formats now, they look fuzzy and out of focus, and the sound is rubbish and all the rest of it. But in a sense, that's kind of a look that people are now trying to recreate, ironically, which is hilarious. But whereas anyone making a movie now, they've got a 4K camera on their phone, or a DSLR is it's got like 14 stops of dynamic range. So the world has changed technologically. But yeah, I was confident, and I wanted to really learn how to use 16mm. So that process of then, an editing film was a physical process. Then you were splicing it, you're cutting the film physically, hanging it up on trim bins, and working on a Steambeck and a pick sync for the sound. So it was a much more involved process. I mean, editing a film in a cutting room physically on film was kind of exhausting. I mean, today I feel like it's too sedentary, like filming, like when you're sitting in front of a computer all the time. It's like, but back those days, it was actually a much more physical workout as well.
I'm so excited to start talking about Razorblade Smile. Were the visuals heavily influenced by the Hammer films and The Hunger?
Razorblade Smile, I mean, I've kind of been evolving my own kind of style, which was trying to be like a sort of, I wanted to bring a kind of comic book, kind of hyper realism to the film. And because we had so little money and we were shooting on an SR2, like 16mm standard gauge camera, it's fairly lightweight, but I mean, still heavy compared to anything you'd be using now. So I just wanted to bring as much dynamism to it as well, and as much style. But yeah, stuff like the Hunger, there's specific bits like the Ariana seduction scene when you have the cutting of the blood and things like that. That was something that I kind of lifted from the Hunger. And the Hunger, the kind of beauty, the beauty and the aesthetic of the vampires was something that I felt was very important. And obviously going into the look of Lilith Silver and her wearing rubber gear, but that stuff with the rubber, that hadn't been seen at that time in films. But myself and my girlfriend, Dina Casello, and she was the costume designer on the film, and I met her at college. She was doing a textiles degree, so she could make stuff and things like that. But with the rubber stuff, we were going to like fetish clubs at that point, and we were seeing all of this stuff for the first time. And I thought, God, I've not seen any of this stuff on film. You might have glimpsed it in a couple of pop promos at the time, but apart from that, you'd never really seen rubber gear, certainly not the designer stuff. So I thought vampires throughout the centuries, and so my inspiration from the Hammer films on that front was the vampires were always the best dressed characters. They always looked the best. The aesthetic of the vampires was always far stronger than the vampire hunters. So I was always seduced by that kind of look. And so I thought, well, if I was a vampire living in the 90s, I wouldn't be wearing so much like lace and silk and velvet. Not that I wouldn't have some of that, but I'd be looking more towards what's the most current thing at the moment. And that was rubber clothing, because it was completely cutting edge. And it was also considered outrageous and not suitable for normal wear. So I thought if a vampire would so go for that. So that's what drew me to wanting to use that stuff. And because we had also met and got to know a number of those designers who were making it. And Eileen Daly, who played Lilith Silver, she had actually worked modeling a lot of that early rubber gear as well. So she was very familiar and used to wearing it. So that all sort of combined, and I thought, well, this is good. This is going to give me something that draws from the same well of the things I love growing up with, like the Hammer films. And so I wanted certain beats and certain lighting choices to be a bit like Hammer. But our film was incredibly low budget. I mean, our total budget was £20,000, but our production budget was only £12,000. Our art department budget was only 500 quid. So we weren't really in direct competition with Hammer films, which were probably made for £250,000 back in the day, which would be the equivalent of £500,000 to £1 million in terms of. So we were, what I was trying to do with like a micro budget was just trying to do everything we could to make it look as great as possible. Well, we only had like 5 lights as well. We had a blonde, 2 redheads, and I think one other little less powerful light, and that was it.
Before we go on, for the people that haven't yet seen the movie, do you want to give a brief synopsis of what the film is?
Razorblade Smile is the story of Lilith Silver, and she is a vampire living in 90s London, and she has decided that because she's got to kill people, she might as well take all of the pain out of deciding who she's going to kill, and she becomes a vampire assassin, a hit woman. So she gets hired to do hits on people, and that way she can just assassinate people and get a dinner and get paid for it. But she still has to live within society and have money to pay her rent and mortgage or whatever. So, but also she's figuring out how to be a vampire. And we find out that she's actually being hunted down by a sect called the Illuminati, and she's in trouble with them for whatever reasons. And that turns her world upside down as she has to fight back. But it's also about somebody who became a vampire in like the 1850 in a duel, and she's now learning how to cope with being a vampire in the modern world, or the modern world as it was when we were in the 90s.
Did you make a film at film school that was the precursor?
Yeah, it wasn't a vampire film. It was a very gothic sort of genre piece called Club Death. It's kind of a Faustian story, that one. It's about somebody who's selling their soul by installments using a credit card. And they're buying this drug called lifelike so they can keep on living their life again to see if they can correct the mistakes that they made. And this was like a very early example of a time cycle narrative. And at the time, the only other film I'd seen like that was Groundhog Day, which was a comedy. But nowadays, this kind of time loop film is actually very prevalent. Stuff like Happy Death Day, Live, Die, Repeat, or there's numerous examples of these time loop films now. But back then, it was actually something quite new. So that was me experimenting with that. And so I had to envisage the afterlife, and Death is a kind of beautiful gothic woman who is there, and she's got this 7-pointed star, and she's trying to take down the corporation, which is Club Death. So, and Chris Adamson, who plays the Afterlife Corporation Magus, is also the guy who plays Sethone Blake in Razorblade Smile, who's the kind of Christopher Lee style vampire. He was Mean Machine in Judge Dredd with Stallone in the 90s, and he's in Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that. And I met him when he came for a casting for that film, and he was so scary. We was like one of the first real actors I'd ever met and cast. But he came in and it was absolutely terrifying. There's some of the casting tape is featured in some of the extras. So it was amazing to work with him. So yeah, I was very, very lucky.
How influential was the music scene and music videos?
Yeah, incredibly influential, because growing up at that time, and for the audience now of I suppose the generation Z or the millennials, and they're used to being able to watch everything whenever they want on YouTube or any streaming service or whatever. Back in those days, we had in the UK, we had like Top of the Pops, which was on a Thursday at like sort of 7 or 8 o'clock, and that's kind of all you had. So you would hear stuff on the radio, but that's the only time you really saw videos. And then there are a few programs, late night programs, that started showing them, and that was in the 80s. And then obviously towards the end of the 80s, or maybe it was early 90s, I think probably about 89, that we started getting MTV in the UK. But MTV was subscription, you had to have a cable thing, so not a lot of people had that. But yeah, so seeing all these videos, and there was such a great music scene, and it was very diverse back in the 80s, and you had all of the post-punk bands and the goth band from Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, Sister Mercy, The Cult, The Cure, and then you had the punk people from the punk scene, like Billy Idol coming from Generation X, and there was just so much stuff, like, you know, John Lydon Pill, and yeah, we were just so lucky. And a lot of this stuff, though, it was mainstream at that point. It was in the charts as well. So you could look at the charts, and there would be like The Cure, Sister Mercy, Spirit of Destiny, Billy Idol. It was amazing. So we were getting all this first time round. And I love music, and all my friends love music. And a lot of the way we dressed and stuff was defined by the music that we loved. And so that was so influential. And the music video directors, people like Tim Pope, who incidentally went out with Eileen Daly when she was a teenager. They were like really young lovers, and he was making all those early Cure videos and stuff like that. And they were so experimental and so much fun, and they were fusing great music with great fashion. And if you look back at that stuff, some of it is it's just so iconic. Not just the music, but the visual looks. And I think that visual look thing, and those kind of stars, to me, I suppose they had that larger than life feeling about them, which I think which is what I always wanted, that I suppose, a vampire characters have. So somebody who feels bigger than a normal life, somebody who seems incredibly present when you see them. And yeah, and those pop promos, they almost like it was a kind of early form of kind of vampire superstardom. And we look back at those people now and they're frozen forever young in those perfect moments. So in a sense, I suppose it does have that sort of vampirical quality of preserving the artists that we love at the age where they were at their height of their powers.
Can you tell us about the Vampire Society, which became the London Vampire Group?
Yes, indeed. Yes. So there was lots of interesting things happening. Once again, this is towards the end of the 80s and the 90s. So when I was at film school, I heard that there was a London kind of vampire society and found out that they had like a quarterly magazine called The Velvet Vampire. And that was available from Gosh Comics or Forbidden Planets, Fantasy Inn, all these places that used to be dotted around London. So when I came up to London, I'd always scour them, and you could often find like this magazine of the Vampire Society called the Velvet Vampire, and you could buy it. And I found out it was run by this lovely lady called Carol Bohannon, and basically you could join. So I thought, I'll join the Vampire Society. So me and Dina, we went to one of the very early vampire societies. They had like a Halloween masked ball full of vampires, people who dressed up, and it was amazing. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, this is really wonderful. And then the scene was getting bigger. And then a splinter group happened where a number of people sort of took over the London thing, and it became the London Vampire Group. And they met every third Thursday at the Phoenix Fiesta Bar on Charing Cross Road in London. So we used to go to that all the time. So I got to know a load of people on that scene. And a load of people on that scene were doing their own creative works, particularly Louis Ravensfield, who went on to do these huge Vampiria events. So he did one of the first big vampire events, Vampiria, at the London Hippodrome, which is just by Piccadilly Circus area. And that was like a capacity of 2,000 people. And he did this sort of one summer's day, and it was like thousands of vampires outside this thing, or people dressed as vampires who were vampire fans. And at that point, this was in 1997, and I'd actually finished shooting Razorblade Smile at that point, and I'd just cut a trailer, which we'd taken to Cannes. And I knew Louis, and he said, oh, well, yeah, come and play it. So I got to play the Razorblade Smile trailer in this huge vampire event, and nothing like that had ever happened before. So all of this stuff was going on, and he continued doing 2 more of those. And there were vampire magazines coming up as he did his own one called Bloodstone, but there was another one called Bite Me, and by this point, Buffy had started as well, 1997. So Buffy had begun, and that created a real resurgent, like, kind of interest. And towards that point on, the vampire stuff just seemed to be everywhere. You have the Ray-Ban adverts where they're all vampires. There was just so much stuff, and vampirism was really cool and hip. And there's like stuff about the new goth on TV programs and all these things. So it was just an amazing time. And I just felt that, I don't know, when you're doing the right thing at the right time, and it just seems to work. When I was doing Razorblade Smile, it was like I knew the right people, I had the right thing, and it was just a blast. It was so much fun because there was this social scene attached to it as well. So it wasn't like feeling on your own, it was like being connected. And a lot of the people from the London Vampire Group, they actually appear in the film in the Transylvania. There was a goth bar called Transylvania Bar in West Hampstead, which ironically also opened up just over the road from where me and Dina lived. I mean, you couldn't make this shit up. So she got a job in there, and we asked if we could film in there. And so that's why we filmed in there. And we got people from the London Vampire Group to come and be extras in. So now when you look at those scenes in Razorblade Smile, it's like a time capsule of some of that stuff that was happening in London. So that is something which felt really unique. And I don't think that's kind of happening now. Certainly not in the same way that I'm aware of. And we just seem to hit the kind of magic timing on all of that stuff.
And how did you cast Eileen Daly as Lilith Silver?
I was aware of Eileen because she was like in a whole bunch of pop promos because she went out with Tim Pope. I didn't realize at the time, but I found this out after I met her. But she was in like pretty much all of the non-stop erotic cabaret videos for Soft Cell, which is fantastic early videos by Tim. But I met her it must have been around 1996. And there was a UK video company, which some vampire people and horror people may be aware of, called Redemption Films. And they were re-releasing and repackaging classic Euro cult horrors and a lot of gothic-y kind of films. And that was headed up by a guy called Nigel Wingrove. And the early short film I mentioned, Club Death, which was my graduation movie. With most short films, you can't sell them. But I heard Nigel Wingrove was running its label, and it sounded like he was interested in doing like a short film horror goth anthology compilation. So I went in to meet up with him and screen the film for him. And he really liked the movie. Eileen was Nigel's girlfriend, so I got to meet Eileen. She was like this incredible larger-than-life character. I've seen her on magazines. I've seen her on video. And then I met Eileen, and Eileen is an absolute force of nature. She's like a sort of a hurricane of energy. And I'd never met anyone quite like her. And we just got on like a house on fire, and we just became friends. And then when I was making Razorblade Smile, I couldn't think of anyone more perfect to play Lilith Silver, because Eileen is larger than life. She has got that absolute kind of energy about her. So yeah, once again, right place, right time, knowing the right people, and my silly little graduation short film took me into Redemption, and I made friends, and that had a big impact on me, and still is, so it's wonderful.
It sounds like it was so incredible working with mates and people in the scene, and it just was this nexus of collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, it really did feel like that, because I was kind of fresh out of film school, and I was trying to get a job, and I was working as ironically, not just a runner, I was working as a night runner at a post-production company called Molyneux, which is in Soho. And I was the night runner. For some reason, I couldn't get a job as the day runner. They wanted me as the night runner. So I was sort of always living this sort of vampire. I mean, I'm a bit of a night owl, but I'd have to go on runs around Soho when somebody wanted a pack of cigarettes, or they wanted food at 3 a.m, or they wanted some sort of whiskey or other things that you had to sort out in those days. It had to be quite resourceful as a night runner. So that way I got to know a lot of people in the post world. And then I managed to get a job as an actual editor, and from there I started cutting trailers. But yeah, there was a real sense of collaboration, and people, I think because you had to go out in the world and talk to people, you had to get to know people. It was a very social time, and filmmaking is more social than a lot of things. But certainly at that time, there was a lot more social activity, and I think a lot of social stuff seems to have moved online. But I think people are a lot better when you're interacting with them and working with them in the real world. But at the time, we didn't think it was special. It was just normal. It was just an evolution of how I was making my short films when I was a teenager. And because I still didn't have any money, I didn't have anyone giving me any backing at this point. I was self-funding this film. So anyone I met that was talented or had goodwill towards me, I kind of tried to get them included, because I thought they would be an asset. That way, made a lot of great friends because of that. And I think the film has a bit of love in it because of that, because people, they didn't have to do it. They did it because they wanted to do it, and they really wanted to be part of something. And I think making a feature film I was 26 years old when I made it. We shot it in 96, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I've made a lot of short films, but not a professional grade. And at best, I thought we would get it released on maybe VHS video and for rental in the UK. I never envisaged it would go beyond that when we were making it. So it was just a continuous process because people were saying to me, oh, for 20 grand, why don't you just make a really good short film and you can use that as a calling card? It's like, I've already made loads of short films. Why don't I just make a feature film? And if it's shit, I would have learned a load doing it. And it's not like I've got any commitments. I'm not having to worry about anybody else at this point. So I just backed myself. And I think that that's something that is a smart move, certainly when you want to start your career.
You talked a little bit about the budget, so I just want you again to say what the budget was. And what's extraordinary is this small budget film made with such passion went on to get a worldwide release, become a cult film, and now has this Blu-ray re-release that's extraordinary in terms of the audience that the film has garnered. So can you take us through what the budget was and what that experience has been like to have it continue to bloom and bloom and bloom?
I mean, I never expected the film to be sort of successful when I made it. I just wanted to make a film that I loved. So I set out to do that. And basically, I've been working for a couple of years now from being a runner to then working as an editor. And I was cutting promos and trailers, and I was working for a little company called Key Film and TV, which is based in North London. So I was just saving up money, and I'd go home at night and I'd write a bit of the script, and I had this idea and I kept on going with it. And it took me over a year to write the script and be happy with it. But I was writing a script that I thought I could make for next to no money, because when I was planning the script, I was writing it knowing that I could film. I was writing the locations in there that I knew I had access to. So that's why I shot a lot of it at my parents' house and the surrounding areas. So pretty much most of the locations in the film are about 5 to 10 minutes walk from my parents' house. So those rock formations, those woods, they're all just close by.
And it's visually extraordinary, the house and all of the locations.
Yeah, and because I grew up there from 5 years old, I knew those areas like the back of my hand, and I'd shot in them before. So it was just like, it was all on my doorstep. Also, when we were living in London, so the bits shot in London, also the same thing. So Lilith Silver's house, which you see in London, that was in West Hampstead on West End, just off West End Lane. Literally just over from there, that's where Transylvania Bar had opened, which my girlfriend Dina was working in. The cemetery stuff, the beautiful stuff where she meets Platinum in the cemetery, that's a 3-minute walk just up the road, going up towards Kilburn a little bit. And the Scotland Yard office was my boss's office, who ran this company. So, so we shot all the stuff in London, which was about 5 or 6 days. The London Underground as well, and had no permissions, just went and did it. I wrote the script so I knew that I could film it in places. I planned it so everything was close to me, so we could walk to them. But I mean, we still had a van where to drive the equipment and all that stuff. But on the whole, it was very carefully planned, knowing that I didn't have any money, so I wouldn't be able to move a unit around, and we only had a crew of like 5 people. So basically, that was the way that this film was going to get made. And I think I'd been inspired by what Robert Rodriguez had done with El Mariachi. That's also how I was used to working anyway, from being sort of completely self-sufficient as working on video when I was very young, to being at film school. We never had a big crew. In fact, the crew on my short film Club Death is actually a bigger crew than on Razorblade Smile, because we were at film school, so we had people who could do the different jobs. So ultimately I planned this film, and the budget was £20,000 to get it edited. So we had £12,000 to shoot the film. That's money I'd saved up, and my dad gave me a couple of grand, and that was the shooting budget. So the art department budget for the film was £500, which is absolutely nothing. And Neil Jenkins, he's been a friend of mine since sixth form college in Tunbridge. We're both punky goths, and we've also accrued a lot of stuff like kind of crucifix and rosaries and statues. And
perfect for set dressing.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of the stuff you see all across the film is stuff that we already owned and had around. Because we really love all of that stuff, it all looks really great. Obviously, the Transylvania Bar, they had those coffin tables with bodies in them and stuff like that was brilliant. I had a full-size coffin because we made one for my short film Club Death. So we just remodded the coffin. We lined it in red velvet, and Neil basically, he put some nice decorative trims on it, so it looks a lot nicer. So we had a coffin. So I wasn't having to hire stuff like that. So basically, the thing was, I can show you, Juliet, your audience won't be able to see this, but hold on. A bit of audio description for your viewers, but I'm showing Juliet a skull. Now this is Cecil, and Cecil is a medical skull which was basically liberated from a sort of biology lab at Westcote College by a very close friend of mine, Graham, and he gave it to me, and then we painted it up for Club Death, so it looks very real. It looks very.
It does.
Yeah. So, and Cecil has been in all of my films, but that's an example of the kind of thing that I have. And to hand, I've got all sorts of things like candelabras. So basically, half of our life is in the film as well, of our possessions. So, but because of that, it had all these really great details. And we went to people like the Black Rose for jewelry. I know Steve, who ran the Black Rose in Camden Market. So all of the jewelry was the Black Rose jewelry, which is really beautiful. And he lent us all of that stuff. We managed to borrow a lot of the rubber dresses. Not that we had to buy the cat suits, though, because of all the action stuff, they got ripped and torn. So we had a stunt one and a hero one. So even though we had all this really great stuff, we were spending the absolute minimum on everything. The most money, and most of the art department budget went on the 2 flintlock pistols at the beginning, because we had to hire them from Batty, because we didn't know anyone who had flintlock pistols. And the guns that she shoots, I actually bought those. Those are replica blank firing guns, which back in those days, you could buy them. You wouldn't be able to do that now. So I actually bought 2 of those. So there's 2 guns, which she's got, and the rock shootout, when she's having the shootout,
yes,
every single person is using the same 2 guns. They pass round. So there's a wide shot where they've got some toy ones, but it's those were the only 2 guns that fired. So I thought, if I buy those 2 guns, that's an effective use of your budget. So just stuff like that. So when we did that shootout on the rocks, I mean, we didn't have any permission, and we were using like blank firing weapons, which it's just the same loudness, they eject the shells and everything. And we thought this could be a bit dodgy, because if somebody says that they're seeing a gunfight on the local rocks, we thought that they may end up calling the police. So we informed the police to let them know that we were going to do it, just in case anyone phoned it in, to not send the armed response unit. And literally the police said to us, "Sir, we really advise that you do not do this." So we thought when we were shooting that scene, we were going to get shut down. And he said, but we got away with it. We were shooting it in December in winter. It was freezing. And as we were shooting, there was only about 2 people that were walking their dogs at the time. But then we had to go back in the summer to do some inserts because we ran out of light at that point. So if you look carefully on there, you'll see the foliage goes from sort of autumnal nothing to green in a few shots, because those are the ones we shot about a year later. But yeah, stuff like that. That's how we got this film made with no money. So the film was in the can for £12,000. And I'd run out of money. I couldn't afford to get the film developed because I didn't have enough money to get it developed. So we had all these cans. I had to get a bit more money together to get them developed, and then we got them telecined. So fortunately, we got them telecined at Molyneux, where I used to work, which in their telecine suite. So we got a really cheap deal on that. And I telecined it onto videotape, and then I cut the whole thing on videotape on a 2-machine Beta SP setup with RM450 manual controls. This is way before non-linear editing and digital video. This is back in the days when everything was still very manual. And I was working during the day as a sort of freelance trailer editor, and the company I was working for, Maverick Media, run by my good friend Will Jeffrey, they would leave at night, and I would go in with my set of keys, go in there, go to say I had a downstairs thing, and I'd be there from like 8 at night till like 6 in the morning, and then I'd lock up and leave and go back again. So that took nearly a year just to edit the whole thing. But once again, I didn't have to pay a penny for the editing though, because I knew people who had to, but I had to use it when they weren't using it. So, and also sometimes I had to then do like a day's work as well in there. So it was
no
pretty
sleep,
crazy.
no sleep for
so
a year.
I called myself a method editor. I was like a real vampire living that. I was up all night every night for nearly a year. Like, that's the only way you could make a film like that at that budget on 16. Yeah. So yeah, it was remarkable. So I had a completed cut on video, which was done for £20,000. And after that, I then took a promo and a trailer reel to Cannes in 1997, the Cannes Film Festival and Market. And all of a sudden, we were showing people this promo and trailer, and they loved it. They were like, wow, this is amazing. And there were different companies who wanted to get it. And they were talking about doing a theatrical release. This kind of like, we couldn't believe it. And in the end, it was Manga Home Entertainment, who were a company in the UK, which was set up by Chris Blackwell, who set up Island Records. And Manga, they gave the best offer. They then paid us the money, like proper money, to do all the post-production, to get it from 16mm to do a blow-up to 35mm film, to do a full 5.1 cinema surround mix. So it was a theatrical spec. And then obviously they spent money on print and advertising, because they gave it a cinema release in both the UK and the US. Plus, we went to a load of film festivals before the main release. So the whole thing just went beyond my wildest dreams. And then it was selling to different countries around the world. And we didn't get a theatrical release in a lot of countries, but places like France, Germany, Japan, like video, DVD, we got great deals. So we got it released all around the world. So it was something, and we got a load of coverage as well from all of the different genre press and even newspapers and stuff doing articles about Eileen, because she was so striking and all this rubber stuff. So yeah, the whole thing just sort of spiraled in a way that we never expected it to, for something which was made for literally nothing.
To be continued.